Hello, welcome to a bit of a video blog about the Kia Stinger. Now, if you considered Kia a bit of a value brand that just makes diesel SUVs for the school run, you need to get with the times. The Stinger is a car that's been long in gestation, but it's finally here and is really quite exciting. Just look at it. It is a kind of four-seater, five-door saloon coupe thingamy. It has a 365 horsepower, 3.3 litre twin-turbo V6 engine. It's rear-wheel drive and it looks amazing. Just look. From the front, it's got this very low, wide and aggressive appearance, and it kind of fits with Kia's very dramatic design philosophy that has been introduced under Peter Schreier. Now, as you walk around the car, you get some hint of its sporting intent. Look, we've got red Brembo brakes here, we've got some side vents. The overall shape of it, as I say, is kind of like an Audi S5 Sportback, a BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe, Jaguar XE, those kind of cars. It's a cool looking thing, but it's got a kind of style all of its own, I think. This kind of big light strip across the back. We've got quad exhaust here and all this kind of thing. It's a very sporty looking car, and with that power and that rear wheel drive, it's got a very promising layout underneath it as well. Better news is that it's also been set up by Albert Biermann, who used to work for BMW, who knows a thing or two about setting up sporty rear wheel drive cars, or so we hope. Now, this being a Kia, although it's kind of pushing the boundaries for the brand, it still has some of those core values. It's excellent value for money, for starters. So this car here is £40,495, all in, no extras. The only extra you can have is a different colour paint, which costs a few £100. Now, if you look at that BMW 4 Series Grand Coupe, that's about 45 grand. It's got 326 horsepower in the 6-cylinder version, similar 8-speed automatic gearbox, so an equivalent kind of spec. So that's another 5 grand before you even add any extras. An Audi S5 Sportback, that's about 48 grand. It's got 354 horsepower, four-wheel drive obviously. Now the Jaguar XE in S form, that's 380 horsepower. These cars have all got similar kind of power output, similar engines, similar layout, similar transmissions, all that kind of thing. So Jaguar's the most powerful at 380 horsepower, but that's 48 grand. And the last one of those I tested cost 60 with all the extras. As I say, £40,495 as you see it, and it looks good. If Albert Biermann has worked his magic on handling as well, well, we've got quite an interesting proposition, haven't we? So can we divorce brand from product? It sounds a bit unfair to Kia, doesn't it, to be kind of saying it doesn't deserve to be building a car of this type, or that it's not got the image to be going up against the German premium marks. But there's no escaping that in this kind of sector, brand snobbery plays a huge part in why people choose their cars. And for Kia to be offering a product that goes up against some of the very best that Audi, Jaguar and Mercedes builds is, you can't get away from it, can you? But I'll try. So you'll have your own opinions about brand image and whether or not you'd be seen in a Kia and all that kind of thing. I'll leave that to you. What I'll try and do here is talk about the Stinger as a car, how it drives, and whether it has what's required on merit to be amongst that company. So, first impressions, they're really good. They're really, really good. Now, Albert Biermann was tempted from BMW to come and set up not just Kia's performance product, but also Hyundai, and reports on his first job with the i30N suggest that he knows how to make a good hatchback as well. But with a rear-wheel drive, a powerful rear-wheel drive car like this, he's really in his comfort zone, and it kind of shows. Now, I was chatting with a bloke from Kia, and he was saying that what Peter Schreier has done for Kia's design, what they needed was something like him to work on the dynamics, and that is what Biermann has done. And the car just feels, in a car like this, you kind of want to make an assessment in the first few meters about whether it's got what it takes, and I've got to say, first impressions of this are absolutely brilliant. Things like the weight of the steering, absolutely bang on. The brake pedal, great. The damping is pretty firm, but it's comfortable as well. The refinement, as you can probably hear, very smooth. It's comfortable. You know, the styling of the interior is quite flash. I like that. The materials are pretty good. It's, you know, all those kind of crucial first impressions are really, really positive. The only one that might put people off is there in the middle, that Kia badge. I'm not hung up by that, as I say. I'm going to try and look at it as a car and what it's like to drive. So at this kind of pace, very relaxing. Now, in the way of these things, we have got a selection of driver modes here. So I'm in comfort at the moment. There's a smart mode as well. As I progress through them like this, you'll see the graphics when you do that are probably rather familiar to BMW drivers. No surprise there. And that does the usual stuff of, it sharpens up the 8-speed gearbox. We get a bit more noise. I suspect that's coming through the speakers, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, it doesn't sound entirely natural. And weights up the steering, sharpens up the adaptive dampers, all that kind of thing. So, usual kind of thing. And straight away, we've got a bit more of a sporting character. The car feels a little bit more nailed down, feels a bit more assertive. And it just feels like a very, very well balanced car, nicely set up, one that's been calibrated by people who really know what they're doing. So the engine, which is basically a Hyundai unit, I don't think we've seen it in any Kias before, but it's been custom developed for the Stinger. So it's a 3.3 V6 twin turbo. 365 horsepower, load of torque from low revs in the modern fashion, and it's good. It's really good. It doesn't rev that high, but it's got so much low down torque it doesn't really need to now, and it really goes, really, really goes. The 8-speed gearbox, that's interesting. That's Kia's own. It's an interesting mindset of Kia's. You know, even Audi, BMW, Mercedes, Jaguar, they all buy in their 8-speed transmissions. Kia, no, they've got the resources and the engineering nous to go out and build their own. They don't just get stuff in from suppliers. So, and it stands scrutiny with that ZF gearbox everybody else uses. I think it's really smooth and it kind of suits the character of the car. This is not yet a kind of M3, M4, AMG type car. This is a sporty car, but it's also meant to be a refined one. So I think an automatic fits. My only frustration is even when you go into Sport Plus mode, which goes into a slightly more relaxed stability control setting, even in that mode, although we've got paddles here and you can select them yourself and it responds pretty well, there's no manual mode. That's really annoying. I think, you know, pretty much all the rivals offer that. And if you want to take control yourself, you can with these paddles. But it very quickly reverts back to an automatic mode, which is pretty frustrating. And also, it's quite a soft limiter, so even in its sportiest mode, it upshifts quite a long way before the red line. So it's upshifting at 6,000 revs, which, okay, it's not really reflective of the way most people drive most of the time. But if you've got a sporty car with a sporty transmission, you at least want to be able to hold the gears for as long as you want and have some control over it. And I think that is a major, perhaps the biggest dropped ball in this Stinger setup. I think that's a pretty serious problem. If you were getting in this car from a BMW, from an Audi or something like that, you'd kind of expect that. But to say that that's my biggest gripe, that's really quite saying something, because the rest of the way this car goes is absolutely spot on. Things like the weight of the steering. You know, this is Kia, who we haven't seen a rear-wheel drive Kia before, or one that's, you know, specifically set up to be a driver's car. But this electric power steering has got really nice weight to it. It's got a really positive front end. Here we go. We've got a nice little corner here. Just roll it in, just the right amount of response. And that rear-wheel drive balance, because the engine's so torquey, it's got a limited slip differential, obviously. It's got, like a BMW, it's got that really nice rear-wheel drive balance. It just feels like an enjoyable car to thread along a road like this. It's very, very impressive. And the damping's really good as well. It's got a kind of, it's not a kind of flowy damping like a Jaguar XE. It's quite tied down in that kind of German fashion. Nürburgring development has inevitably figured quite highly in this car's setup. But they have spent time here in the UK, so we get a specific UK damper setup for this car, which is pretty impressive. We're also about the only ones to get a rear-wheel drive Stinger as well. Most of the left-hand drive markets, this car is four-wheel drive, so we're lucky we get our own damper setup, we get the rear-wheel drive version, and arguably the sportiest Stinger you can currently buy. And it's just a really enjoyable car to drive. I am really impressed. To say that Kia, a brand that doesn't have any history of building cars like this, can, at its first attempt, build a car that stands comparison with the best of what brands like, well, BMW, which defines itself by its rear-wheel drive sporting saloons, that at its first attempt, Kia can build a convincing alternative to that, is really pretty impressive, I've got to say. And I quite like the fact that they've made it quite aggressive as well. Now, you won't see much evidence of it here on Dartmoor with its quite strict speed limits and things like that, but I've been driving the car for a day now, and let me tell you, it is definitely rear-wheel drive. And if you've got it in this Sport Plus setting, which is perfectly comfortable to use on the road, it's not bone shaking or anything like that, it's lets you steer from the rear, put it that way, which sounds like normal motoring journalist claptrap, but it really does. And you don't have to be on the lock stops, you can just feel it as you come out of a roundabout, just a lightening of the steering, just a balance that is really enjoyable, and certainly a lot more pleasant than the Audi S5 Sportback, which is, you know, hate to resort to stereotypes, but, you know, a little bit understeery and stodgily Audi. I think of the cars in this class, BMW isn't at its best at the moment. I think probably the XE has a similar sort of sense of flow along a road like this. But, you know, again, high praise to Kia that, you know, we're talking about it in comparison with a Jaguar and saying it handles as nicely. That's really, really cool. And the rest of the package is impressive as well. You know, I think this interior is pretty stylishly carried off. It looks smart, feels well screwed together, no rattles or squeaks, and with that 7-year warranty, if there are, you just take it back and get it sorted. And the equipment levels are pretty lavish as well. We've got head-up display, we've got all sorts of driver aids, we've got all the gadgets you'd expect of a car of this level that you'd usually have to pay extra for. And so remember, it's for just over 40 grand for a 365 horsepower rear-wheel drive car with all the kit. So this is a really, really nice car. It's a good looking car inside and out. It drives really, really well. It's excellent value for money. How important is brand to you? I mean, there will, as I say, be a bunch of people who wouldn't even consider it just because it's a Kia. But to be honest, I think people need to reconsider this kind of whole brand snobbery thing, because as a product, as a car, it's really, really good.